Hey guys, welcome back to another Rest Eat Move podcast. This is Matt, and we have the big fella back in the house in person. How's it feel to be over there in the hot seat? I still haven't got you a new chair, but it works.
Yeah, the chair's fine. I'm good. I don't have the view of the lake, but no, it's awesome. I'm here for a little time. We'll be here for a week, and then I'm be
Going
back
back.
in October.
So today, as we were getting started, what are we going to talk about? Going from reactive to curious is what we were discussing, and I think this is a great podcast in itself, and I think it builds off what we just talked about from the strength training part 1, part 2. But here's my idea. I think most of the world has been conditioned from a health standpoint to be in this reactive state where I go to get my blood test. I just hope that nothing's wrong. And if there is something wrong, I trust that the doctor's going to tell me what to do. Very reactive on basing on what they're going to tell me.
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't have any injuries. I don't feel any injuries. And if I do, I'll just get it fixed. You know, if I break my leg or if I tear a muscle or maybe I'll get a massage. But I'm going to react. I'm going to get those things. And so what triggered this for me is as I've gone on this journey that I've shared many times with my hamstring and my leg, and I would say it was more of curiosity than reactive, but there was pain that triggered it. Like I needed to have some awareness that I needed improvement because we all have blind spots. And so today we're going to take you on this journey of how everybody, I think, can be in a more curious state, but really the progression is how do we go from this reactive state to a more curious state, because the curious state is going to be optimization, thriving. I think everyone wants that outcome. Can't control that outcome, but to get closer to that outcome, you can change your behaviors and beliefs and process. And so reactive to curious. Have you always been curious?
Well, I think you become more curious when you have more awareness, which we've talked a lot about.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if you don't know, you're a golfer, and sometimes you'd say like, okay, how do you hit a fade? How do you hit a draw? How do you hit a punch shot? How do you do it? Because you practice it, right? You just now you're like, oh, that's interesting. But there had to be something that triggered that awareness. It's no different. Like I look back for myself, I became very curious in the nutrition piece, and reason being, when I competed in bodybuilding, I was taught back in the day, you just bulk up and you cut down and, load up on protein and whatever. But my skin started flaring up and I went and got a blood test and my CPK levels were off the charts. So I had a lot of muscle breakdown. I didn't know any of this stuff.
So on that, so there's other people that are doing the same thing that are having the same symptoms that didn't become curious. What do you think would be the difference?
I was curious on like, is there a better way? I felt like I wasn't healthy. So I remember driving back from Grand Rapids after competing, and I bulked up again until like 218 pounds and competed at like 170. And I'm like, this isn't healthy for me. And I had a different goal. I was trying to compete and see how good I could get, but it wasn't about just winning. It was about how do I get in great shape, but be in the healthiest I could. So then I started learning more about nutrition, like the health of it, not just the performance side of it, not just the look. And so I started dabbling in more of that. I started understanding omega-3 fats and gut health and and so as part of the training program when we worked at the Michigan Athletic Club is that was a component that was not existent. Everything was about working out. But when we started bringing more of that, and then we had some of the trainers who are really knowledgeable like Walt, and we got into more performance and injuries and things like that. But at the beginning, I didn't, you don't know what you don't know. So that curiosity really kind of drove that bus.
So you have the awareness that it could be better, could feel better, having some symptoms, there's some pain, it creates that curiosity. I think about some of the smartest people in medicine that I've come across that maybe closed that curiosity. So they've been aware of many things. why would that ever be the case when somebody thinks they know everything and then shut it down and go the opposite? They're not gonna open up the curiosity unless something goes off the rails.
Well, again, people have been taught for a long time. Can you imagine whatever your training is, and then you realize, well, maybe I have to second guess that. I mean, I've made a ton of mistakes over my career.
So formal training sometimes can get us rigid.
Can get you really rigid, and I think over time you have to get the ego and park it at the door and say, hey, wait a minute, maybe there's a better way. Maybe there's a better way to, when you're going through physical therapy, you know a lot about conditioning and physiology and whatever, but I mean, I'm interested. Tell me more.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. I mean, I'm very interested in anatomy, and I've taken anatomy, and I have a degree in exercise science. But when he's telling me where the psoas muscle is and the origin and insertion, and I don't
But
know.
that's not what you do every day.
Yeah, no, and that's the amazing thing that is funny to observe from my side of it is I have a great physical therapist that we have a great curiosity together,
Mm-hmm.
but you can see him thinking, wow, you know so much, yet I know this so much deeper, and yet there's things that I don't, and it's kind of this ebb and flow. But curiosity is right there at the doorstep because I go in there and act like I don't know anything.
But when you're trying to create better relationships with people, you're not telling them, you're asking them. Tell me more about your family. Tell me more about what your interests are. Tell me more. So now you're opening up that box. And so to me, when you talk about box of beliefs, you gotta look at that like, okay, maybe, but if you don't have that, you're not going to go anywhere. When you're like when we're speaking in front of large crowds, the best audience always are the audiences that are most open. Like, never thought of that. Versus, my cholesterol level's high. I'm going to be on a medication. That's just what it is. You mean there's a better way? Yeah, there can be. So I think, when I did that long form podcast recently, if the listeners haven't, heard it on cholesterol and testosterone, I received a whole bunch of emails about that. Like, I didn't know that. And then when I go to my doctor's saying, well, I don't need that test. Well, okay, so you're the customer, you're the patient, you can do whatever you want. But if they don't even open that can of worms up, they're going to be medicated or whatever goes on. So I think that thriving thought process or increasing capacity and all that, I think that's where people are, whether it's in school and academics or athletics or, health or whatever it is, finances. I mean, you got to ask the question, think about finances and the elections here, and there's a lot that people just don't know.
Well, you said it when we were getting ready. You have to be intentional. If you're trying to feel your best and have great health, or maybe break a cycle of family history of something, you have to be intentional. You're not gonna just stumble on it. If you want to have X amount of dollars in the bank, you don't just stumble on it. You have to be intentional about it and maybe project and anticipate and plan. And I was writing several things down, and this happens when we do these more, I would say, open topic podcasts. From going to reactive to curious, it's interesting. When you think of our medical system, it's based on reaction.
Oh, for sure.
And so the smartest people in medicine are very reactive, and they think reactive, and that's what makes them great at reactive medicine. Car accident, emergency, like think of the emergency room. If it was you're thinking all day of how am I going to thrive? Well, no, you got to react. Is that a gunshot wound or
Right.
a ruptured muscle, like emergency, your arms hanging from? But then I was thinking today, I just got done with a meeting with my accountant, and it's a critical part of our business. But I think most people would say an accountant's very reactive and conservative. Well, I'd say the same thing with a doctor or an accountant or anybody. These professionals can also be a tool if you're curious. So instead of saying the medical system's reactive and that's the problem, me and you both look at it and say, I'm going to pick and choose, and I'm going to bring the questions to these experts in these spaces. So in my case, when I go to see a physical therapist, yeah, that tends to be a reactive type of a practice.
Sure.
You get an injury, you get a
Yeah.
referral. But if I ask really good questions and I'm curious, that's like an ace of diamonds.
Right.
Or if I go and I know a doctor that's a cardiovascular surgeon and I'm asking really good questions, that could be some really interesting information. Now, they may be conditioned to kind of have this narrow tunnel, but they have a wealth of knowledge that if you ask the questions, it opens up. So I was thinking about that with the accountant. If I don't ask really good questions, we're going to do the cookie cutter, what everyone else does, by the book. But if I say, is this possible? Is this possible to do this?
Right.
I don't know.
Well, and I think what you're making the point is that many times you got to do a little homework prior to whatever you do, back to the intentionality. If I go to my doctor and I'm a little bit like that cholesterol podcast, I would highly recommend listen to that. You're going to go get a blood test. You're going to have better questions here. And you know this, if somebody comes in and they're lined up the questions, you have an amazing conversation. If there's no questions, it's really difficult. So again, whether it's the accountant or your medical practitioner or whatever it is, as the consumer, you have to be intentional about what questions am I going to ask? What do I need to know? Where do I need to get information? Who am I surrounding myself with? Like we were talking about this, you're talking about your solus major. Well, I want somebody that does this 24/7. And they have...
And just by touch knows that's tight, not
knows
tight.
exactly right.
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast the other day I thought it was interesting about bone health. Just press very, deeply on your shin. If that's painful, you probably have a challenge with bone health. And so I didn't know that. All the years, I didn't know that. If you jammed your thumb into my shin bone, so as soon as I heard it, I did it. And it didn't bother me. I'm like, okay, my bones are good. But back to your other thing is, Walt and I were talking about this a long time ago. We were talking about, why don't people do X? He goes, because there's no pain. So those are the things that create awareness.
That's an interesting thing. So if someone comes to me with 21 questions the first time, super excited. They come back with 21 questions and they didn't take any action off the first 21. I'm not as excited.
No.
So I think some professionals, to give them credit, if you don't take some action, those questions are going to get tired. And I was thinking, I'm coaching, as is football, 2nd and 3rd grade, tackle football. And they ask questions, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. The questions that drive me crazy are, when's practice over? Are we gonna scrimmage yet? These questions that are nonstop.
Right.
But the best questions are when we did a drill, and the drill was you got to get on your back and you got to get up as fast as you can, make a tackle. And the challenge is some kids are fast to get up and some kids are so slow and they can't make the tackle. And so we broke. This kid, his 3rd grader, comes up to me and says, hey, Coach Matt, can you show me how to be faster off the ground? So he took the feedback, hey, this is the problem. And then he said, I got some areas of opportunity. Can you show me? Take that same example.
Right.
That's 3rd grade curiosity.
Yes.
You go into your doctor and you say, hey, doctor, you keep telling me that my cholesterol is out of whack. I've done this, 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 and this. Is there anything else that I can do? Versus saying, doctors, this is just genetics, isn't it? Again, the question is really powerful.
Right.
The action, to me, is really the missing piece that we see. People ask questions all the time. There's blogs, and
Right.
information,
Absolutely.
and podcasts.
Yeah, it's not what it's what you do.
And so when we were getting started, you said, you don't know what you don't know. That's true. I think we all get more curious if we allow ourselves as we get more experience.
Just go in there, and again, Dr. Phil Nierenberger always talks about that, having that beginner's mind. If I go in with a beginner's mind, I don't know anything. Like as is 2nd and 3rd grade, I don't know anything. It's incredible what happens.
It's the best question I got all year. It was, hey, Coach, based on what we just did and based on the area of opportunity, now I'm asking, See, I can tell, but if you don't ask, I don't even know if you're
Right.
interested.
So yesterday I had a young man, and he has high blood pressure, and his blood pressure, he's got a couple different meds, and they want to give him another one. So I started going through the sympathetic parasympathetic nervous system and how blood pressure is elevated, and talked about nitric oxide in foods. So I kind of went into the weeds, but then we broke it back down. So so he didn't have any questions, and I know he doesn't really he didn't. So I stopped. I said, let's start from the beginning. Tell me what I just taught you. And he was like, you know. So sometimes you have to step back and say, well, let's start from the beginning. And he said from the very beginning, you said stress is physical. I said, so what does that mean to you? He didn't really have an answer. So let's start right there. So if you feel like you are threatened, your body's going to react physically and your blood pressure is going to go up. So, I mean, in my behalf, I was going too quickly. I wasn't asking the right questions to the person. So then we came back and I said, so, okay, now you know stress is physical. What can you do to help relax that sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight? And he says, is it breath? I said, yeah, it's breath. So I just had to step back and say, okay, now it's in your lap. You start asking that. And he started getting it then. He started asking the questions, and we kind of kept rolling that way.
Yeah, it's a two-way street.
But if you're not getting, if you think about a health profession, you walk in and they talk to you about this and that, and you stop and say, hey, listen, tell me how that medication works in the human body. That now you're opening okay, this is what it does. Is there another option that I could do to do that?
And you not only will get maybe more answers around what you can do, but you might get some answers. Is this the right person in your team?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, so what you just said there was interesting, is the curiosity goes both ways.
Both ways.
Now, we can't always expect people to have the curiosity, so we have to initiate it. Again,
I had to initiate yesterday.
And in your case, you were the teacher, and
yep.
we're talking for most people that are not going to be the actual teacher. But I think an interesting part is two parts. Going from reactive to curious is scary for some people because sometimes we avoid the things that we don't want to know. You know, what does the scale say, or what does the blood work say, or, you know, is the family history creeping back up? Because it leads to responsibility.
Well, and again, I'll just pause real quickly on that, because that's exactly right. But I always tell my clients, you have to have the courage to measure. You have to have the courage. You have to go up and step on that scale, no matter what it tells you or not tells you. Or I have to go in and get my prostate checked for men. Got to go get it checked. You got to get a colonoscopy. As much as you don't want to do it, everybody that hits 45 or above, you need to get a colonoscopy. These are things to have that courage to measure. But again, if it's just out of sight, we talk about the engine light going on in the car. If the engine light doesn't go off, everything's good. And that's the same thing in the human body. But the engine light's going off. We just don't know how to listen.
And we're in a world of more reactive because there's more stimuli. And when there's more stimuli, we have more choices of saying, well, I'm going to look at that and look at that, versus curiosity takes sometimes introspection. You have to go inward, pause, think, plan, visualize, versus, I'm just going to have the numbers tested while I'm getting on my phone, and if the doctor says to come back, as was game one of the football, Ez was very discouraged by running back. He just didn't fully understand some of the things we were saying. We'd say go up the hole, and he'd avoid the hole and he'd go wherever he wanted. Well, he didn't want to fail, so he said, I don't want to play running back. I said, Ez, just because you don't know the answer or it wasn't good the first time doesn't mean we quit. And in our society, I think we want to quit so quickly if it's not going the right way.
Mm-hmm.
React. I'm going to react to it. And so he stuck with it. He learned. He had to make some mistakes. And then game two, incredible transformation, loves running back. So in this world where it's easy to say, I'm going to just I'm going to rely on someone else to do it because I don't want to do it, or I didn't do it well the first
Right.
time, or I don't have good health right now, and so it just is what it is. I think we have to go more and say, I want to take the responsibility.
Well, and I think what you said too, you're talking about reactive and curiosity, but you just hit the big one is you got to make mistakes. There's no avoiding it. You have to. The more you fail,
That's why it's scary.
keep failing. Yep. Because again, you kind of lost your golf game when you went from your senior year to freshman in college, and that's painful. You're on a college scholarship, and you kind of forget how to hit the ball again.
Can't break 80.
Can't break 80. So again, and then you all of a sudden you kid it back. But I think that's kind of the special piece too. Is like, you take that transformation, and it is painful to go through the mud, but that's kind of the best stuff sometimes. Coming out of the mud.
If I'm trying to avoid injury at all costs, I might not be pushing myself, for
Right.
example. Or if I'm trying to avoid foods that are just easy to eat and no thought, I might be avoiding some key nutrients that would really benefit me. And you don't know that.
And I had a gentleman this morning we work, and he just had some shoulder issues, and I said, "Let me just tell you, the shoulder is the most mobile joint in the human body. Everybody's going to hurt their shoulder at probably some point in their life, like their back. It is what it is, unless you're not active." He goes, "Yeah, I'm active." And I go, "Well, you're probably going to hurt your shoulder once in a while, and that's okay. But now you understand scapular retraction and mobility and flexibility and all these things." And so I think that's the thing we don't want to be afraid of. Like, I was talking about water skiing a couple weeks ago. I've water skied more this summer than I probably have in the last 10 years. And now, before I was kind of like afraid of it because I haven't done it. I'm like, am I going to pull my hamstring? But now I'm excited about it because I've done it enough, and I'm like, feel comfortable doing it. So I think we all feel like that. I don't want to fail, as doesn't want to fail running, being a running back or whatever it might be. But we have to go through that, and we have to make those mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, it's you're hoping that the check engine light doesn't come on, and I showed you a clip of Seinfeld where Jerry was just trying to get an oil change, and the mechanic's so obsessive about the car, and he's not using the right oil, and Jerry doesn't care that much.
Right.
And so the truth is, if you're listening to this or know somebody that just needs to get busy and they're not getting busy, for whatever reason, there's not enough intentionality because they either don't care or it's too scary. And those things can be mixed and matched. But, I mean, there's a funny episode where he wants him to care more about the car than he and sometimes from us, we do want people to care more about their body and their mind and their health more than maybe they do. And we can't do that for anybody. So that is a big piece that's overlooked.
And Tab always says that, I'm not going to work harder than you are. I'm going to work really hard, but I'm not going to work harder than you are. And sometimes that does happen in everybody's aspect of their life. But at some point in time, you're going to have to put the effort in. And the effort is, that's the journey. That's the most incredible part of all of it. Is if it's so easy, then it's so easy. But sometimes the struggles and the challenges are what really gets people excited about their lives, the growth.
All right, so we'll give a couple of takeaways as we're kind of wrapping up here. Going from reactive to curious, I think it's a life thing that everyone should try to pursue. And whether it's sport, professional, personal health, the more curious you are opening yourself up for, I think, magic, for joy and thriving and peak performance and peak happiness. But the mistake I see a lot is to wait to change when there's actually pain. Now, pain can create change. There has to be some stimuli. But I think our biggest opportunity or optimal time for some of these changes to happen is when we feel good. So here's an example. If I want to continue to have great energy for the next 50 years, it's probably going to be a little bit less effort if I think about what I eat when I have pretty good energy.
Mm-hmm.
Versus we see people come to us all the time. The pain is so high that they want more energy now. And that's going to be a longer path and maybe a more difficult path because there's a lot of things we got to unwind and unravel. But You were talking about a client that came to you and said, why would I take superfoods? I don't have any issues." That mindset is reactive. I'm going to take the superfoods once I have issues, but I'm not going to take the superfoods until I have issues.
Well, then I had to come at it from a curiosity standpoint. So tell me, what type of omega-3 fats are you consuming? You know, have no idea. What type of foods are high in selenium and zinc, magnesium? So I had to kind of wake him up, like, you're not eating any of these foods. And then you start diving in deeper. How's your sleep? Well, I don't sleep well, and so they don't think they have
And
a
you start
problem.
working harder than he is.
I was working harder than he was, yeah. But he comes in and he has these other questions over here, but he's not connecting all the dots.
Yeah.
And then his whole thing was he wanted to get stronger and bigger and on. But I'm saying, well, if you don't sleep, your hormones aren't gonna. I had to go down that path. But he wasn't connecting the dots with the superfoods and why do we need omega-3 fats and what's spirulina acrylic going to do and on. So
remember when you were at that conference and the guy with the telescope was looking at other galaxies?
Mm-hmm.
So what was he looking at again? He was looking at
a second galaxy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what makes me think about this? Curiosity actually can be super scary. So I think a space is kind of scary. So you say, well, we're in the Milky Way. It's really big. And there's how many different galaxies?
Well, here's the thing. So this guy had one of the largest portable telescopes in the world. And we were in Arizona, which is perfect for the stars. And so the company I was hired to speak at hired him. And so it's at night. So your mom and I came by and everybody's in doing the dinner and there's nobody there. So I come up to him and I heard about
thinks it's cool.
I came up to him and I said, hey, and he goes, would you like to look at a second galaxy? I have no clue what he's talking about. So we get into this stuff and now he's talking about the time that from that star to here, he's telling you all about this stuff. And that's like, I don't know how many years in the future.
A lot.
And I'm like, why? I can't even fathom this. But it really hit me like, I have no idea about any of this stuff. And it was really fascinating.
And we all have curiosities at different spectrums.
So the guy loved me because I just kept asking all these questions. So the next thing you know, we had kind of a line behind us because now people came out and they're, most of them just say, hey, can I look through the, see this or that? He goes, so anyway, I think that's what we all,
But when again, my point is the gentleman that's maybe not curious about selenium and zinc, and again, there's a progression. So like I know very little about space, but it seems really overwhelming. How many galaxies? What's the time? You're telling me that there's potentially this, and this, and there's a black hole and gravity, and the sun's how much bigger than it's not even, you can't even put it in scale. And I think sometimes health is overwhelming to people in that way.
Oh, for sure.
And that puts us back into reactive, or let's just say that space, I don't want to think about that. I don't want to think about space is that big.
But I think, as you said earlier, if you have this, I'm always, beginner's mind is a big one. You got to have a beginner's mind. And if you're teaching golf or health or whatever it is, or the space, and it kind of did that at the end with this guy. This guy was amazing. And I just said to him, how do you start with teaching people? And he goes, well, I start with this. I start with planets and I start with stars and what they are, the differences, and, on and on and on. I'm like, so he was really cool. He really liked that. I was asking him, like, how would you teach this to a class? And I think so if you have a beginner's mind and you're willing to make mistakes, I think that's it. Because once you start doing that, I mean, if you're helping me do whatever, if you're talking about nutrition, let's just start with some basic things. Well, I don't like the way that oatmeal on the run is made. Okay. So what don't you like about it? And, how do you make it? And it's all these little itty bitty steps. What's your morning ritual look like? Well, maybe we could change this. Well, you're telling me over here you don't sleep well, but you work in 2 jobs, you're working 60 hours a week, you're doing this, you're that. Wow. So now we create space and pace. I don't understand that. So once you start doing that, the beginner's mind, making mistakes, now you start really, and then create a team around you. And that's what I think more and more people need to do.
Yeah.
Because health is, like you said, health could be a big bad, the big bad wolf, and it doesn't always have to be.
I think we need people around us that kind of hold us accountable, push us. People have different personalities. You need a team that you can rely on and trust. And the awareness comes back to us. We have blind spots, and sometimes we need other people to help us with our
Absolutely.
blind spots. And sometimes the blind spots just take us, we got to step back.
And I think the other thing, we want the listeners and the viewers to send us your questions. We're happy to respond any way we can. But I think the big one is right away is like, okay, let's get curious. Let's not worry about, making mistakes, have that beginner's mind. And that leads you to a lot of different avenues. Now we're moving into the world of thriving versus just trying to survive.
Okay, so here's how we're going to leave this. We're going to go from reactive. We're going to keep working on it. We're going to try to think of things of the curiosity versus I'll wait until something goes haywire. Reaction or reactive, you're going to usually be defensive. Not my fault. It's genetics. It's this, it's that. I don't have any time. I've tried everything. I've done it before. I'm just not built that way. I don't enjoy it. All these excuses, and it creates this fixed mindset.
Fixed mindset.
And then if we can move to that curiosity, all of a sudden there's hope. There's optimism. All of a sudden, miraculously, there's more time. There's more space. And you go from reactive, which is excuses, to curious with solutions. So if you come and say, I don't have any time, versus a curious thing would say, I'm going to find time. Same amount of time. One is, I have no time.
Right.
One is, I will find the time. Solution. And I think that's a great way. I took a Dale Carnegie course. There's the 3 C's. Don't criticize, condemn, complain. It's really hard to do. But when it comes to our health, if we get out of this our own way, it's unbelievable what can happen. And a couple of things working against us. We're in a very reactive medical system. It's really easy to get caught up into the things that don't matter, that distract us. But today we thought this would be really good, and we had a nice little laugh around Seinfeld and Jerry, and the mechanic cares more about the oil change than he does. And that might be fine. Some of you listening might care a little bit less than we do about why cholesterol is such a optimal molecule in the body that is so misunderstood, and that's okay. But I think a little bit more curiosity is an exponential return on
it's interesting, last little point here, but I've had quite a few emails from the cholesterol podcast, and some of them led to calls. And so you mean to tell me that's some of the starting. You mean to tell me that I have very little risk if these ratios are? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm telling you. And so it really hit me like they're listening. You're listening, and that's the first step.
And they're getting their toe in the water, and they're not sure if they want to be the deer that goes out in the meadow first.
Yeah. If you have some of those questions, and then you're having better dialogues, talking to your health professionals or your accountant or whoever.
Again, we're going to go from excuses to solutions, and you do that from going from reactive, everything's reactive, to curious. Have a great week. We'll see you again next time. And shoot us an email, info@OnTargetLiving. Any questions you have, we're very curious to see what questions are out there. Have a great day. Bye-bye.